Peter Goodhue just told me a few minutes ago that talking for more than 15 minutes is a really bad thing. And he's also told me that this is the graveyard slot. So, sorry. I'm very pleased to be talking. It's 10 years since I last spoke at Liverpool. It was at the Biology Cube 98 conference. And it's great to come back 10 years later. It's great still to be in e-learning and to see that there are interesting things going on. And haven't things changed a lot in 10 years? That's one of the things I want to talk about, because 10 years isn't such a long time ago. You know, it's Tony Blair still. So we remember 10 years ago. And so 10 years hence, and even 20 years hence, actually, certainly for people of my age, doesn't seem very far into the future. But there may be very big changes. So I'll talk about some of those things, and maybe you'll find this interesting and possibly entertaining. I'm currently director for the thing called the Institute for Educational Cybernetics, which is a new research centre at the University of Bolton. And people immediately think that means I make robots. I don't make robots. Cybernetics is the science of communication, or some people say the science of organisation. So it's not about robots, it's about communication, it's about organisation. So I want to talk a little bit about what our concerns are. And our concern is not technology. Our concern is the future of education, how it's organised. There's the organisation, and of course communication is what we do. That's what we're about. And it's interesting how similar the Victorian picture and the present-day picture actually are, and how similar our practices still are. You know, a Victorian teacher could come into a modern university and would know what it's all about. But this bottom picture, I think, is maybe different, and maybe that's where we're going, or not. I don't know. Our focus in the research centre is the role of technology, and again, we are seeing huge changes. I mean, the iPhone and the iTouch are really revolutionising the way which, at last, we can seriously think about mobile learning, which I've thought has been an irrelevant concept for quite a long time, however much it's been hyped. But maybe now, maybe we're beginning to, with broadband, with 3G, with great communications, maybe technology is getting interesting. And certainly we're concerned about access. And, I think widening participation and globalization are kind of key issues, I think, for modern higher education. Isn't it interesting how management exhorts us to use technology, but how little management use it? I mean, I'm always railing against our committees at Bolton, that we sit around with bits of paper with spreadsheets on them and look at the university's finances, but we don't have, what-ifs available to us on charts. We have the technology. And why do I always have to come in when I'm travelling? And I could come into a committee meeting, but I happen to be in London. Why can't I just come in through video? Because management isn't set up that way. So this picture is a picture of the ministerial decision room in Chile in 1971. Looks a bit Star Trek. It looks a bit like 1971's version of the future. But look at what's on the walls. Charts with what-ifs, which allow the Chilean government to actually try to manage the national economy. We're not doing this within our own organisations, and yet we're exhorting teachers and learners to embrace this. So I'm interested in this too. And cybernetics. Norbert Wiener, the founder of cybernetics, 1948. Stafford Beer, the inventor of management cybernetics. That's a younger version of me. This was actually taken in Liverpool, strangely enough. That's Stafford Beer's viable system model, which I've been using a lot to try and help us understand how education works. So I want to talk a little bit about trends of significance for universities, and you may be surprised by some of them. The first thing that's worth saying is that we operate as if that's the reality, that things just gradually change and the curve continues in a fairly straight line. But actually, it could be like that, or it could be completely different from that too. We don't know. We don't know how the variables are going to change, and we have to be ready for a hugely changeable world. For example, we all know about global warming, but global warming is now really, I feel, is going to become a major issue for the way that we organise ourselves, with floods and so on. Is this an issue for universities? I think it probably will be. And how about this, the energy crisis? This is really beginning to hit now. It's a great picture, isn't it? That's our future. It could be short term. might not be 20 years, it might even be 5 years. The energy crisis is really beginning to hit. Now, we continue to operate as if the curve is going to move gradually up. It may not. Suddenly prices may be extremely high and may affect the way that we operate in our organizations. So I'll talk a bit about that later. And globalization of the economy. We know this, but we act as if it isn't true. We know that China will become the world's leading economy. I saw a statistic the other day that said that if you take the 5% highest IQ 18-year-olds in China, that's more than the total student population in the UK. That's interesting. I don't know if it's relevant, but I mean, it certainly makes us think about what it means for education and the way that we work in a global economy where the center has moved from America and Western Europe to China and India. Don't discount Russia either. It's certainly going to be a major energy power. And as for economic migration, it may well be reversed. It may well be that we'll be going to China to seek work in their universities rather than their students coming to our universities. I don't know. It may be. And will we become more closely allied with Europe, or will Europe fragment? I don't know, but something will happen. It won't stay the same. And that's going to have a big impact on what we do as a nation. And as for society and culture over the next couple of decades, will there be a return of mass unemployment as the economic forces shift? It may be, and that will have a big impact on widening participation and what we do with higher education. Are we preparing for this? We seem to operate as if the world is just going to continue in an unchanging way. But the nice bit is I like the explosion of the arts. I like the fact that kids are actually playing instruments and sticking their videos up on YouTube. I like that building. I think it's really good and creative. And I like that there are people doing this kind of stuff in Second Life. I've just come from a really interesting presentation by Peter Miller on Second Life and education. So there's interesting stuff going on. Students are changing. What will they be like in 20 years' time? What will my teenagers be like when they're 36 in 20 years' time? What kind of ways will they expect to be working? So here's a few quotes. It says, I'm not going to read it out, cyberspace is going to become an unprecedented medium for civilization. Here's another one. The new distribution of the means of production in the knowledge economy, cutting through old hierarchical controls in politics, economics, and finance, and the way that we organize our society, the way that we organize our institutions. And that cyberspace is becoming a self-organizing mechanism that could lead to dramatic increases in humanity's ability to invent its future. This is not kind of futurist nonsense. This is the United Nations University. It's a quote from a report from the Millennium Project, which is set up by the United Nations. I strongly recommend it. Every year they look 20 years into the future and try to predict what's going to happen. The reports are very interesting. If you read them one after the other and see how their predictions themselves become adaptive, it's very interesting. I've left a reference in the slides. So the way that we organize ourselves will be less like this kind of organization chart. It's going to be a bit more like that kind of strange picture over there. So our organizational forms may become a little bit more kind of interesting and less, I know my place. You've probably seen these kinds of slides before, but just let's look at technology for a moment. In 1988, not that long ago for me anyway, if you had a 100 megabyte hard disk, that was big. 10 years ago, 1 gigabyte hard disk was big. These days, your typical computer, 300 gigabytes. So carry on, 10 years' time. What would you do when you've got 30,000 gigabytes, 30 terabytes on your machine? But what about 2028? I have no idea. It's going to be phenomenal. What are you going to put on there? What quality video? What sorts of things? I mean, this is amazing. It may not happen, but it looks like it might. And what about RAM? 1 megabyte in 1988, 64 meg in 1998. I did a project in the mid-90s, and which was a virtual learning environment that ran on a PC. And when I suggested that we should trial it in the university, they said, well, our machines have only got 32 meg of RAM, and we're never going to have 64, so forget it. Well, how much RAM have you got in your machine? Where's that going to go? 2 gig these days, typically. That's what my laptop's got. What happens when you've got 100 gigabytes of RAM? What can you do with that? I have no idea. And what is massive, it's unthinkable. What about bandwidth? When I started, it was 5 years before that, but let's say 1988, 10 kilobytes, 10,000 bytes into your house, a slow modem. I bought a 10 kilobyte modem, 9600 modem, around about 10 kilobytes. It cost me £1,000 for that modem. In 1998, we were getting around a 57.6k modem. Some of you remember those. Now we get 8 megabits into my house in the country. 8 megabits, that's a lot. That's, I can get full motion TV on my computer, down the wire, down my telephone wire. Amazing. So what happens when you get 150? That's just about what we get into this university now, I would guess, that we will share. And what about 2028, when you can get everything down? Millions of channels, all sorts of things, video conferencing, who knows what we're going to be doing with this. And actually in the university, what's going to be happening? I can't remember what was happening in 88, but these days it's about 155 megabits. It's going to be astounding in 20 years' time. What are we going to do with this kind of technology? So let's just look back briefly. This is just to remind the older ones of you in the room that in 1995 the web wasn't clear to everybody that this was the happening thing. In 1995 I had a conversation with someone in our IT department who said he couldn't see a time when every student would need access to a web browser. So that it wasn't clear that this was going to happen. In 2000, we started to get commerce applications, and Amazon and eBay and these sorts of things. Again, it wasn't clear, and there's lots of stuff in the press, will this work? There's only a small proportion of trading happens online. Maybe this is going to come and go. Well, I think we do a lot of trading these days. And then we got the social web recently, a few years ago, and suddenly everybody was into MySpace and Facebook and all sorts of things. Came with bandwidth, but nice picture that, isn't it? I pinched it, it's not mine, so if you're videoing this, I'm sorry. And 2010 which is very soon, it's kind of now really, is the web of services. But suddenly the web moves from being content, from being text and images and video, to being software. We're seeing it now. You can go to Google and they'll give you a word processor and a spreadsheet and a presentation tool. That's not running on your machine, running on the web. And the more applications that you get on the web, you can begin to connect them. So you can get a program like Google Earth, another program which has got a directory of restaurants, and superimpose them, and suddenly you've got a map to get you to the local restaurant. So these kinds of mashing things up, making software interoperate and work together. Zoho is very interesting. They've got lots of very interesting applications. And Amazon. Now, Amazon have seen the writing on the wall, and they're beginning to provide lots of services, including cloud computing. We'll run your applications. You don't need to have an IS department anymore. We'll run your student record system. We'll run your VLE. Whatever you want, we'll run it. We'll run it in this huge server farm somewhere in Montana. But you don't need to. You don't need to worry about these things. We'll look after them. It's interesting. I don't know if it's good, but that's where things are going. So there's huge changes because we have bandwidth, because data can travel very fast. What it means for borders, what it means for the legal system. When our students' data is sitting in America and they have the Patriot Act, which means that they have to turn that data over to the state. Big questions for us to answer in the future. And then 2028. Who's heard of singularity? Anyone in the room? No, just one person. I'm glad, I'll tell you what it is. Singularity is when everything changes. That's a picture from the Matrix. This is when it's predicted by some that the internet will become more intelligent than humans. I'm very skeptical about this, but I thought I'd better put it up there because some very reputable people, some very smart people are saying this sort of thing. In 2028, they think this is when everything changes. And if Moore's law continues, with it says here, within 25 years, it'll be a computer could be as smart as a human. I don't know what as smart as a human means, really. I don't think anyone does. But 25 years after that, it could have the total processing power. I don't know what human processing power is, really. It doesn't make much sense to me. But this is what they're saying. all human beings. Whatever it means, it's going to be something, and it's going to be profound. This is the world that we're preparing ourselves for. And I think worrying about our module catalogue and is not really preparing us for this sort of world. There are other thoughts that, yes, we have to think about our module catalogue, but we have to think other thoughts too. So let's now think about education for a minute. How is education, which is trundled along, kind of alongside, actually exploiting some of the positive things extremely well? In 1995, the typical use of technology in universities was CD-ROM. Some of you will remember the TLTP program, where you're going to get the ultimate content to teach all of your, for all of your courses. Well, where is it now? But CD-ROM was the ultimate thing in those days. But we knew alongside the web was coming. By 2000, people would begin to use the web seriously. But it tended to be the homemade website made by people like me. I could make a website, I could put my materials on, I could have a discussion. I could customize my website to suit my students. And lots of people were doing that. But that then gave rise to, well, couldn't we make one that everybody could have, the VLE? And certainly in 2000, VLEs were being made. There was, at that time, 172 on a website that linked to all VLEs. 172 to choose from. How many can we choose from these days? Blackboard and Moodle, I think it is, pretty much. There's probably a few more knocking around. So 2005 really was when VLEs and MLEs became embedded. That's when we said, yes, this is e-learning. It has arrived in universities, and in my university's e-learning strategy, it said that by 2008, 30% of all of our modules would be on the VLE. That's a great e-learning strategy, isn't it? I did my best to try and undermine that one, I have to say. It's no longer there. Now, it's been very interesting for me to see your agenda in this conference, where 40% of all the sessions mention technology. I think that's great. I think that's really good. Lots of blogs and wikis and e-portfolio. VLEs are still there somehow, but they're changing. They're beginning to incorporate blogs and wikis, and so you can have a walled garden using some of these new Web 2 type technologies. And service-oriented architecture. You don't need to know about this, but this is a new way of thinking about how you can assemble lots of functionality so you can end up with the system that you want for your students very easily. Not just we all do it the WebCT way or we all do it the Blackboard way. We do it differently because we know how to assemble technology to suit our students. And JISC, I have to reference JISC because JISC funds nearly everything that I do. The framework is the framework which they're trying to elaborate, which will allow you to assemble technology in that sort of way. That's presenting it very simply. So that's where we are now, roughly. Let's go back to my original kind of points. If energy costs are going to be really huge, then this kind of thing is going to be really difficult. It may well be that it will simply be too costly to run the campus. Or it'll be so costly that our fees will have to be much higher than they are now. There's no question that energy costs are going to be hugely greater. Even if you go to wind power, whatever we do, they will be hugely greater. We've just seen that begin to happen, I think. I may be wrong. And I think this is going to become really problematic. I gave a similar presentation to the senior management team. This was, the Vice Chancellor's got a JAG, so I like to But actually travelling to the university could well be a problem for lots of people unless they live locally. It's going to be on a bicycle if the university campus is still open. So that's going to be an issue. And I think at some point in the next 20 years, distance learning will become the norm. I think at some point students will begin to say, why do I need to travel? There's such rich content out there already. I can get all that content. And it's so easy to contact my tutor or smart people on the web or my colleagues, other learners, to have discussions. And the tools are so great to let me discuss. Why do I have to go into a room like this and sit and listen to someone talking for length about their pet idea? I think this is going to change, and we're beginning to see the signs now. I'll show you some more stuff around that. So I think this could well be true, but I could be wrong. Libraries are always important. It's always been an argument, is a library in a university or is the university in the library? Well, I think that content is moving online and libraries are moving online, and I think libraries will be predominantly online. And I think that is going to be the exception rather than the rule. They won't disappear. but I think people are already looking for their content online predominantly. They're not going to the library as the first port of call, only if they can't find it online. And I think most teaching will be online. This is just a nice picture I found, but you will be able to do increasingly rich things online. So I think the research agenda is going to shift, and as well as all the stuff that we know is already important, environment, energy, nanotechnology, and biotechnology, I think we need to start looking at new areas of research like new ways of living, new economics, and the return of the arts. I think that the arts, the humanities may become very strong in the future. And here's a suggestion. Maybe it's time that certification and teaching became separated. I suggested again to our senior management team that we should do an exercise. And when we charge to find out the cost of certification as opposed to the cost of teaching, and offer that to our students. Certification, it's expensive. You need rooms, you need to write the papers, you need to mark them. There's lots of stuff you need to invigilate. Wouldn't it be interesting to know how much of their £3,000 or whatever it is that they pay in their fees is spent on certification and how much on teaching? And if they knew that, wouldn't it be interesting if they were able simply to go and find their teacher online, findateacher.net, teach me my chemistry degree, and I'll just go and do the exam at Liverpool University. This was proposed 10 years ago in the Times Higher by someone from the Office of Public Management. And the letters page the following week was just full of absolute vitriol. They hated this, and I think it's a very challenging thing. But if you're a student, it's very challenging these days to actually stump up the cash and give up 3 years of work and to do the course, to do the exam. I think there's interesting stuff here. So I think the curriculum may need to adapt, and I think you begin to see bits of this stuff with self-organized learning online, with the move towards work-based learning it's in the Leach report. Recent just call on curriculum design mentions inquiry-based learning. There's a big shifter thing going on as we move to the workplace, as we try to become more learner-centered, to begin to change our curriculum. So we're not delivering, the canon, the content that we always feel a chemistry or a history or a biology degree should have. We're beginning to work with the students and their needs and emerge the curriculum that they need and support them in acquiring that. I think the degree as the chunk, the thing that matters, may have to change. It may be any size. You want to learn something? You want to learn how to do Java programming? You don't want the certificate? You just need to know how to do this? Yes, we do that at our university. No. We only do a 3-year degree. Sorry, that's it. I'm exaggerating. But you could argue that certification is the core product of universities. That's where we add most value. You could argue that. And the teaching is actually an optional extra. In fact, when I was a student, there was an anecdote where I was at a session earlier that was given by Elspeth McLean on storytelling, and I'm now going to lapse into storytelling. When I was a student, I did a maths degree at UMIST, and there was one student who, after the first week, never came. And in those days, you didn't have attendance certificates. He didn't come for the whole year. And of course, the exams in those days were at the end of the year. And he turned up and he took the exams, and he got the top mark of anybody on the course. And people said, this is amazing. And actually what he'd done was he'd been staying in a flat with other students who were doing a maths degree at Manchester University before they were merged. And he decided that was much better teaching, and he just went to their classes, and no one took a register, no one noticed, because that's how it was in those days. So interesting. Maybe we're going to have some students like that these days, or will our register stop them? Attendance will be a prerequisite for getting your award. Who knows? So, what is to be done? Well, this is the Institute for Educational Cybernetics agenda. This is where we think we need to be active, and this is where I suggest higher education needs to be paying attention. I think we need to model the future learner, try to understand what our future learners are going to be like. In 20 years' time, as I said, my 15-year-old daughters will be 35. They'll be lecturers if they decide to go into this game. And I know what they're doing with technology these days, and I know what they're going to expect, or rather, I don't know what they're going to expect, but I know it's going to be technology rich in the future. What are the kids who are currently 5 years old, or the ones that aren't yet born? What will they expect from university? 20 years isn't a long time, but it's going to be very different, and it's going to be very varied. So we need to understand them better, I think. I also went to a very interesting session on plagiarism and the problems of plagiarism. Again, this is relevant to modelling the future learner. And it really struck me in that session that actually students are beginning to see, or some students are beginning to see universities as a kind of game. It's a sort of strategic game. You go into university and the aim is to get a degree. And there's lots of things that you have to do. You have to go to lectures, you have to read stuff, you have to write things. And you take risks in that process. A risk to miss some lectures, a risk do some plagiarism. It's a risk. You may be caught. You may not be caught. If you're not caught, you save some time. So it's a strategic game. And you can almost see this now as a computer. I was actually thinking, maybe there's a computer game here. Here's a bunch of stuff called Graduate. I've already got the name for it. So they see it as a strategic kind of activity. And these are risks that they take. And unless you can actually get students away from seeing this as a game and actually seeing it as an authentic activity where the learning matters rather than the certification, I think we're going to be wrestling with plagiarism, and we are going to have an arms race of, we'll catch you with this tool, and they'll say, no, we've got a better tool. They can get a tool that'll rewrite my bit of plagiarism intelligently, and you'll never spot it. There'll be all sorts of things, as long as it's seen as a game of strategy rather than an authentic activity. There's lots of stuff here for us to kind of think about. I think, I said this 5 years ago, and I'm sure I probably said it 10 years ago, we've got to get that stuff online. We have to forget about our, owning our lecture. I'm amazed that we don't automatically, as is happening today, just record everything we do. Top right-hand corner there is the flip phone. £100, you press a button, it records video and audio. That's it. USB plug sticking out, stick it into your computer onto YouTube. Right? You can do that. It's really, really easy. We just have to record everything, and it doesn't have to involve, 3 technicians, a smart camera, and all. You can just do it. You can just do it. You can do it in your living room and put your lecture online and say, look, I'm not coming in today, but here's the stuff. Let's get our stuff online, and then let's spend our time engaging with our students and not just delivering. And I'm sorry that I'm now not practicing what I'm preaching at all. Thank you, Peter, for reminding me about this. But look at all these initiatives. Stanford on iTunes, MIT OpenCourseWare. They're throwing their stuff out. They're not saying, oh, no, maybe I should sell this. They know that their added value isn't their content. Right? The content is out there in all sorts of forms. The added value is contact with them in whatever form it is. And it's the same here. And it's the same in all universities. Open University doing the same thing. Just provides a service for you to put your stuff. I don't think it's very good yet, but it's there. And TeacherTube, YouTube for teachers. Or just use YouTube. There's lots of interesting stuff on YouTube. There's technology out there for you to stick stuff online, but just get it out. That's not the important thing. Record what you do. Don't make a special effort. Just record what you do, so that next year you don't have to do it. And guess what? If you record what you do, you can watch it yourselves. And you can decide that this isn't good enough, and next year I will do it again, but I'll do it better. You can get reflective practice coming into the university, for real, instead of us talking about reflective practice, as we have done for so long. Video is going to be, as the bandwidth and processing power increases, video is going to become very important. I think we can have really exciting, rich events in video, not just in the video conferencing suite and this rather strange still thing that we do at the moment. Very rich things that look something like that. It's happening now. There's a presentation on YouTube of John Chambers, who's the CEO of Cisco, where he's talking to the audience on a stage, and it's a rather darkened stage, and a man walks on, and he's the same height, and he talks to him, and they have an interaction. But that's on video, and that's coming from 14,000 miles away. It's very, very impressive. That's the kind of thing that we will be able to do. Imagine going into your study and flicking a switch, and your wall becomes a window into your office in your university, and there are your colleagues on the other side, and you can wave to them, and you can leave it on while you're working. This is what's going to become possible. It's possible now, though difficult. It'll be commonplace. So I think researching what we do with video environments, how do we live with video, how do we engage with them, is where we need to put some attention. We need to understand self-organized learning. So this is a page from 43 Things, where people go and say, I want to study economics, learn Russian, whatever. This is a page on economics. I just typed economics, and all the learning activities on 43 Things. Just ordinary internet users have said, I'm interested in doing this, who else is interested? Let's get together. It's very, very interesting. We need to understand this stuff so that we can exploit it and see how that marries in to what we do, And this is a real question for me. I mean, I come from an educational background, although I've worked in a long time. These are my real concerns. And my question is, if pedagogy is a science at all, we have to be able to elaborate it in a formal way. And if we want to do it online, then it's not enough just to say, well, I'll use a bit of this, a bit of this. At some point, we need to be able to elaborate what we do so we can implement it online. Now, this is the conceptual model from IMS Learning Design, which is, if you like, a proposed model for elaborating any kind of pedagogy. What I'm saying is, as professionals, we need to start thinking about how we teach in a rather more formal way. I'm not saying that we have to teach more formally, we have to think more formally about what we do. We have to be more analytical about the way that we do, because we may not be doing it in classrooms in the future, we may be doing it through different media. So understanding what we do in an abstract way, I think, will be useful. And I think, ultimately, we have to think about who we are as professionals. It's kind of, up until now, we've really, in many ways, replicated what's been done to us. We went to university, this is what we received, we didn't like it very much. We do pretty much the same kind of thing, but we try to do it a bit better than what happened to us. That's kind of how it's gone. And yes, there's lots of initiatives about, professional updating and joining the HE Academy and so on, but I still think we've hardly really tackled this. The new professional has to master all the tools which are available to allow teaching and learning to take place. It is everyone's duty now to be able to handle this technology. It's everyone's duty, and I think it should become a prerequisite of all people coming into higher education or any education to be able to use technology the way they want to use it to do what they want to do, and not to go, oh, no, it's not for me. I think that's got to change. We've got a range of projects going on. I've just put them up there so you can have a look at them. The one the Splice is actually looking at the changing teachers and learners' habits online to try and get people who don't typically work online to begin to use social software and explore what that means. It's an interesting project funded by GIST. You might want to look at their website. This is our new initiative, Interdisciplinary Inquiry-Based Learning, where we're running a number of new programs, including a Master's in Learning with Technology, in the workplace, 100% online, 100% full-time, while in full-time work. We think this is a new model where your workplace becomes your research, where your assessment becomes your demonstration of added value to your workplace. Some really I think a really interesting model. I know some people are going to the Sheffield Conference on Inquiry-Based Learning tomorrow. I think Peter mentioned it. But I think inquiry-based learning is very, very important, very, very important in the coming period. And 10 Competence is a large European project, again looking at similar things, looking at learning in the workplace. I've just put those up there for you to have a look later, possibly. And finally, this is my interest, we have to understand our institutions. We can't have all this innovative practice if we don't have innovative management and new innovative structures. And I think this is going to be the hardest one to shift. I said earlier, there's an interesting how they resist, the managers resist technology. Well, they need to really think about the new form of an institution. Given new learners, given new technologies, given new practices, what does it mean to manage that kind of institutions, that kind of institution? And I think that the way forward is through collaboration and experimentation. I don't think it's through league tables. League tables are not going to get us there, I don't think. League tables will keep us where we are, only better, maybe. So I think lots of experimentation, lots of funding around to experiment. But collaborate with other universities, let's see what they're doing. I'm really interested in some of the things you're doing here, which I'll take back to my university, collaborate with European institutions. You know, there's what's happening with the internet broadly, media industry, and so on. Lots of stuff. And finally, as I said, experiment. I just came from a session on Second Life, and it's nice that my last slide is actually Second Life. Actually, Bolton doesn't have a presence in Second Life. For those of you who don't know what Second Life is, you can ask Peter, but essentially it's a virtual world where you can set up. Liverpool University, Peter told us, has bought an island and on Second Life, which is going to be used for educational activities. So if you're now intrigued, you can go. I've sold your project, Peter. But experiment, play with it. This may be of no value to you whatsoever, or it may be the best thing that you've ever seen. You know, experiment, play with it, learn from others. So, Mike, this is the question I'm leaving you with. Is, you know, it's always interesting to me that we know that in 50 years' time, if not 20 years' time, everything will be different. But we know that next year will be exactly the same. You know, how do we actually deal with that paradox? So what do we do today to prepare for 2028? That's over to you. Thank you very much for listening.